Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Federico Talks Watches. Today, I think it's about time that I make another video in my popular alternative series. And I want to talk about alternatives to the iconic Rolex Daytona. Now, before we get started, customary wristwatch check. Today, I'm wearing the Seiko SKX with the Pepsi bezel. This is the American market version, not the JDM version. And yeah, I haven't worn it in a little while, and I'm kind of missing the Pepsi colors, so I figured I'd try it back on for the day. And you know what? I really love this watch, as I've said many times before. But, as I said, today we're going to talk about alternatives to the iconic Rolex Daytona, particularly the one in steel. Now, the Rolex Daytona is a chronograph, and it's a racing-inspired chronograph, made famous by people such as Steve McQueen wearing it in the movie Le Mans. Now, this is one of the most iconic sports watches out there, and it's also notorious for being really hard to get. They're about $12,000 USD for the steel bezel version, and there's usually a very, very long waiting list. So this list might be for people who either don't love the Daytona, want something different, or who really love the Daytona but don't really have the cash or the patience to get one. Now, this is an automatic chronograph, and it's 100-meter water resistant, and it's 40 millimeters wide. What can I say? A Daytona's a Daytona, and finding alternatives to it is going to be quite difficult. But I've come up with a list of a few, and maybe I miss a few. Let me know if there's an alternative to the Rolex Daytona that you guys think should have made it on the list. Leave it in the comment below. My first pick as an alternative is one that everybody should see coming, and that is the Omega Speedmaster. Wow, what an iconic watch in its own right, and probably the biggest competitor to the Rolex Daytona. It's a 42mm chronograph, and it's also in steel, and it also features a tachymeter bezel. However, this one is manual wind based on a Lemania movement. But this is the professional version. You guys can also get the automatic version based on an ETA 2892 with a chronograph module, and that is 39mm. But we're going to talk about the 42 manual wind because that's the most iconic. It's also significantly less expensive than the Daytona. I think new, you can probably pick them up around $3,200–$3,300, and significantly less used. Not to mention, it's also a lot easier to get than the Daytona. Personally, I like the look of this watch better, and I do own the Apollo 14 limited edition version myself. The Speedmaster is definitely a great alternative to the Rolex Daytona. Following up, we're going to get another fairly obvious choice out of the way, and that is the Breitling B01 Chronomat. Now, this is another steel chronograph, but it's more aviation-inspired than racing-inspired. However, they both come in steel bracelets, they're both automatic, and Breitling is a big competitor to Rolex, so I think this watch applies nicely. This watch comes in 44mm as well as 41 and houses the in-house Breitling B01 movement. I've actually made a video about that movement. I'm a very big fan. I'll leave a link right up here. And it features a few advantages. It has a longer power reserve, and it's 500 meters water resistant. However, the look is pretty polarizing, so it's not for everybody. Of course, it also comes in two-tone, like the Daytona, but you have the option of putting this on an alligator or calf strap, which steel Daytonas are bracelet only. So this is a little less expensive than Daytona in MSRP, but you can get it significantly less at a discount if you do a little negotiating. And it's a lot easier to get. However, I think a lot of people don't give the Breitling Chronomat the love it deserves, considering the awesome movement in it. The B01 is a solid choice. Now, moving along, we have a watch that has a little relation to the Daytona, and that is the Zenith El Primero. I'm partial to the tricolor subdial version. Now, Zenith has made the El Primero for many, many years, and it's probably the most iconic in-house automatic chronograph movement out there. And it beats 36,000 actuations per hour, which is significantly smoother than the 28,800 that the Rolex beats at. However, some may argue that it needs service a little bit more regularly. Now, the Rolex Daytona, before they went in-house, actually used the very same Zenith movement. And that was in the late 90s and early 2000s. So there's a little bit of a relationship there because, Rolex didn't have an in-house chronograph movement and they bought it from Zenith. Now, I know I've been saying the word iconic a lot in this video, but this definitely qualifies. It's a racing-inspired chronograph. They can be had from anywhere from 40 to 42 millimeters, and you have a ton of choices of straps, bracelets, and even case shapes. These can be had for about half the price, even less than a Rolex Daytona, and it's got that great silky smooth movement, the El Primero. So, if you're not a big Daytona fan, maybe you might be a big Zenith fan. And you know what? I think you should be. Up next is a watch that I've mentioned in a few previous videos, and that is the Chopard Mille. Now, this is Chopard's racing-inspired chronograph, and the name Mille, translated 1,000 miles, is named after the classic car race in Italy. Now, these watches come anywhere from 39 to 44 millimeters, rubber straps, bracelets, and a lot of dial configurations, and they house an ETA 2892 with a chronograph module. This watch is nowhere near as popular as the Daytona, and it might lack some of the collector prestige, but you know what? I love the look. Chopard knows how to make a beautiful dial, and they executed it wonderfully. Not to mention, if you guys hunt these down, you can get them for probably under $3,000 so that's a hell of a steal, not to mention all the color options. And it has that classic racing-inspired flair, and most of them have a tachymeter bezel. So this, to me, is a no-brainer as a good alternative to a Rolex Daytona. Now we move along to a watch that's slightly more modern, that hasn't been released too long ago, and that is the Calibre by Cartier. Now this is a very bold sport watch by Cartier, and it comes in 42 millimeters, and you have a bracelet and strap option, and two dial options, white or black, very similar to the Daytona. It houses the 1904 MC in-house movement with a chronograph module, and it's a very, very modern movement with ceramic ball bearings and things like that. However, it's not the prettiest movement out there. The watch, though, I think is very, very fashion forward and certainly more modern, but is a little bit busier in the dial layout than the Daytona. But it's a solid effort by Cartier, and it's their first real in-house sports chronograph. Pretty solid choice if you ask me. However, this is a little bit pricier. I think they're about the price, if not a little bit more expensive than a Daytona MSRP. Since the Daytona is basically full price at all times, you can get this at a discount. I think it sneaks in right under the price of a Daytona. If you like Cartier, if you want something a little bit more fashion forward, a little bit more bold, then the Calibre is the watch for you. Coming up next is another iconic competitor to the Daytona, and that is the Tag Heuer Carrera. Personally, I love the Jack Heuer version, and that's the picture that's right up here. It houses the ETA 2892 with a chronograph module. This is a beautiful vintage-inspired Carrera, just like Tag's lines of the past, and it's made for Jack Heuer's 80th birthday. I also love the little red hints on the dial. But this comes in many different colors and configurations, bracelet and strap, so you can't go wrong. These, once again, are significantly less expensive than a Daytona, and rightfully so. They're not in-house. Tag is nowhere near as high-end as Rolex. However, it is a very, very beautiful piece, and one with a lot of personality. You can probably pick these up in the 3,000 range. Lastly, we have a watch which is not talked about enough, but some people might consider it cheating, and that is the Tudor Tiger. Tudor is a company owned by Rolex. However, they don't use in-house movements, at least not in the Tiger. Now, the Tiger houses a Valjoux 7750. Now, this looks like a Daytona, but it is a little bit thicker because of the movement, and it's got a different dial configuration. It's more the 12, 6, and 9 dial variation. Now, these Tigers are getting up there, and these were actually built as an alternative to a Daytona by Rolex's little brother brand, Tudor. These are getting very, very collectible, and, you know, they're a very beautiful watch, and they have that Rolex feeling because it's a very similar case and bracelet. So if you're a fan of the Daytona, but don't want to spend the money, and you still want something very collectible, then maybe a Tudor Tiger is the right watch for you. Anyway, guys, thank you for sticking around for another episode of Federico Talks Watches. Please don't forget to drop a like on this video, and subscribe if you found it useful. That really, really does help. And leave a comment in the comment section below to tell me what you think of the list. I'm sure there's a ton more alternatives, and I might have missed some out, but these are what I think fit the bill most closely. Once again, thank you for sticking around for another episode of Federico Talks Watches, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.